Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's webinar, Threat Intelligence Processes Are a Journey, Not a Destination, brought to you by Threat Connect and broadcast by UBM. I'm Michael Krieger, and I'll be your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. First of all, this webinar includes audience question and answer session. You can participate in the Q&A by asking questions at any time during the discussion. Just type your question into the Q&A text area located to the right of the presentation window, and then click the Submit button. At this time, we also recommend you disable your pop-up blockers. Questions we don't have time for, we'll get a written response afterward. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. You may also download a copy of the slides by clicking on the Additional Resources button located below the presentation window. If you're experiencing any technical problems, please visit our help guide by clicking on the Help link below the presentation window. In addition, you can contact our tech support helpline, which is also located in the help guide. Now, on to the presentation. Threat Intelligence Processes Are a Journey, Not a Destination. Joining us to discuss today's topic is Rich Barger, Chief Intelligence Officer for Threat Connect. Rich is a pioneer in threat intelligence analysis, and he is the CIO and Director, that is Chief Intelligence Officer and Director of Threat Intelligence at Threat Connect. About 5 years ago, Rich sought like-minded security experts, and together they founded Threat Connect. He has more than 15 years supporting DC's most elite cyber defense and intelligence organizations from within both public and private sector as a former U.S. Army intelligence analyst and security consultant. He's still an analyst at heart, and his tech and operations vision is truly what makes Threat Connect a disruptive new technology for organizations worldwide. Also with us today is Robert Simmons. Robert is the Director of Research Innovation at Threat Connect. With an expertise in building automated malware analysis systems based on open source tools, he's been tracking malware and phishing attacks and picking them apart for years. Robert is also the author of Plague Scanner, an open source virus scanner framework. Gentlemen, we have an hour. We have lots of content for you. I'll turn it over to you two. Go ahead.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for attending today. So this is going to be a replay of the presentation that Rob and I gave at this year's SANS Cyber Threat Intelligence conference here in Virginia about a month ago. And we've got a lot of positive feedback. Many users and customers have been really, really interested in not only the presentation but the complimentary blog that we'll highlight here at the end. But we just wanted to cover some of this material again, make sure everyone had some of the opportunities to, make sure that everyone had an opportunity to hear some of our ideas. So the genesis of this talk is rooted actually in a presentation that I gave in 2014, also at the SANS Cyber Threat Intelligence Conference when it was back in DC. And the presentation at the time covered the ROI on threat intelligence sharing, where we wrote a complimentary blog titled The Dollars and Cents of Threat Intelligence Sharing. And in this blog, I attempted to highlight a few scenarios where resource-constrained organizations as well as analysts could actually save some time and money in the acquisition or the processing, the analysis phase of threat intelligence to the act of sharing it. So, basically being able to enable organizations to get free analysis and not recreate the wheel when a specific organization was targeted with the same thing. So, the general idea of threat intelligence sharing, in my mind, is still very valid. It's just, the understanding, of the value of threat intelligence sharing and the process is really evolving. And, namely, we should be focusing our efforts in sharing and collaborating really internally before we're collaborating or overcomplicating the issue and sharing across multiple organizations. But that's really for another time in another webinar. And today's goal is to really talk and highlight about the current sharing processes and really needing to mature beyond the silos and some of the boxes that we've regulated them to. So I really wanted to step back and ask, is it possible that our priorities are off? As you might have noticed, as nerds sometimes we tend to over-engineer, overthink, and complicate things. So maybe we can slightly hack or adjust what we're already doing to get greater gains for the organization. perhaps we shouldn't be placing as much value in the created things, so those eggs or those indicators, that you might see on the right hand of the slide here. Maybe the real true value lies in the creator, the chickens, by which these indicators or information comes about. And then maybe sharing the business process or the trade craft by which these things are created, really should become the priority or the focus. So next slide. So let's consider for a moment that our adversaries have specific processes by which they leverage their capabilities and infrastructure to target their victims and in how they carry out their evil deeds. One of my favorite models that I feel best highlights the value of indicators contrasted against process in the context of threat intelligence is David Bianco's Pyramid of Pain. So Bianco's Pyramid of Pain references a variety of common indicator types layered upon one another in their relative value to the adversary, where their perceived value to that adversary increases as you move up the pyramid. And so the premise of this model is that organizations with the ability to impact or disrupt an adversary's tactics, techniques, and procedures will likely cause that adversary the most pain, meaning we're going to increase the adversary's operational costs, their time and their money, in hopes that that adversary packs up and goes home, or they spend more of their resources and time rattling the doorknobs of maybe a lesser mature organization or target. So next slide. So it's here if we invert that model in true Threat Connect form, we get another diamond. And my goal here is not to make David Bianco's base ugly. This is just simply an idea here to highlight an idea. So next slide. If we want to see basically where does TTP or the concept of process become paramount, in the adversary relies very heavily on the TTPs to be successful. So does this also apply to that of the defender? And so I'm not talking about sharing the adversary's TTPs. While that is always very nice, analysts always love to get as much detail in that department. What I'm really driving at is sharing the defender's TTP, especially the recipe or the process by which I help the organization amass useful context, interpret that context, so that I can enable decisions. And basically what we're going to be getting at is business decisions. So basically an inverse to what the pyramid highlights is, if the pyramid helps you measure the potential usefulness of your intel, the inverse allows you to measure the potential usefulness of the process by which created that intel. If the pyramid also helps you measure the difficulty of obtaining that intel, the inverse allows you to measure the value prop or the process by which creates or obtains that intel. And then lastly, if the pyramid states the higher up you are, the more resources that your adversaries have to expand to be effective, where the inverted version, the defender, must also establish the right instrumentation and the right process to be effective in leveraging that derivative intelligence. So basically, the so what of this exercise really highlights that process is paramount both to the attacker and the defender. Next slide. So threat intelligence consumers, practitioners, both will agree that the costs in the production and the acquisition of good quality threat intelligence that you can sink your teeth into is very expensive. And this is because, if you think about it, you have a very scarce and expensive resource in the way of very specialized practitioners distilling an even more scarce resource in usable threat intelligence. Now, luckily, one of the best ways organizations, time after time again, have saved money, time and money, is with business process. And most companies will have some sort of business process across their various verticals, be it from HR to sales and marketing. And these business processes are often data-driven. They're measurable in a way that allows an organization to validate if these processes are indeed working or not working and where they can improve. So this is a very, very simple concept. The last thing you want to do, as an individual or as an organization is spending resources on something that ultimately wastes the organization's time or money or your time and money. So let's think real quick about the business processes associated with buying a pizza, from advertising to online ordering, customer service, and delivery. Right? If I order a pizza and I get the wrong toppings a day later, now there's a few starting points here in that scenario that allows me to look at this and improve the process. Now, the same principles apply when delivering a warm slice of threat intelligence. It needs to be timely, it needs to be relevant, and it ultimately needs to satisfy those hunger pangs for the consumer for that quality threat intelligence. And this is really where I want to drive things home. If threat intelligence is going to be a key investment area for organizations and taken seriously all the way up to the C-suite, practitioners and leaders will have to be thinking in these terms. They're going to have to be enabled to demonstrate that there is some sort of value, a return on this investment, and a compelling impact that threat intelligence really brings to the organization. Next slide. So let's step back here and start transitioning into how we are giving away some threat intel business processes. And I just kind of want to paint a picture real quick. Now, back in the day when I was a young analyst kind of coming up in the world, I had a bunch of individual purpose-built solutions. Now, rarely did they work together. I was given, Windows XP machine, maybe I had some Excel, Power Grep to kind of munch through the data, and maybe analyst notebook so that I could draw a visualization and brief it to the boss. So, let's consider for a moment that also since early man, we've had various forms of individual tools and purpose-built solutions, such as Fire and Arrowhead and whatnot. And many of these solutions would be used independently at first. But over time, as we started to better understand them, we could start to think about these secondary purpose-built solutions for various use cases. And so I just want to highlight that the creation, the use, and the refinement of these primitive solutions were shared across the generations. They were iteratively improved upon over time. And so the process by which Fire was created, the wheel, wasn't hoarded away. Rather, that knowledge of those respective solutions was proliferated globally. And so, I suspect that, currently we find ourselves in this Paleolithic age of threat intelligence. Things are very, very early for our community. And that's why I suspect that some organizations and individuals that are very new to this space are placing the emphasis on the wrong thing. So we need to place greater emphasis on selling or sharing those outputs, those indicators, those eggs, not the process by which we use to create them. So there's an opportunity here, for folks to begin to place the hunting in and around, this sort of thing, or build their program, based on a platform that supports some of these individualized processes. So, at this point, I'm going to start, turning things over to Rob, like mentioned earlier, is the Director for Research Innovation here at Threat Connect, and he's going to kind of walk you through a hunting process that we have implemented. But, as we go through this, don't, lose sight of the forest for the trees here, that this should be giving you some ideas on how you can adopt and perhaps even improve upon this business process for your own individual needs. So with that, I'm going to give everything to Rob here.
Thanks, Rich. So I just wanted to cover again what you're looking at right now. Rich mentioned these are the ancient tools that were used in the past to produce threat intelligence. So what we're going to look at in a moment, if you change slide, this is the more modernized tools, but the thing is the process is still not there. The process of having things automated and allowing an analyst to not spend time doing the moving of data back and forth, but spend time doing analysis just wasn't there yet. So I want to cover exactly where we were before we began looking at how to improve the process. So on the left-hand side, you can see the Yara hunting process. And at the top, you have the point where the analyst is updating the rules in their rule sets. And they're doing this in text files. Those text files might exist on a file server. They may exist only on the workstation. They may have multiple copies. There might be copies that are on one person's workstation rather than another. Some of these workstations might be leaving the office and coming back every day. None of these are good conditions and to really have a clear hold on your rule sets. So the second step here is to take a set of these rules in the rule sets and then deploy them out to a VirusTotal hunting system. Now, don't get hung up on this being VirusTotal. I'm just using this from my biology background. This is our model organism for this experiment. So you can use this in any type of hunting system that uses Yara or another signature system, as long as you have a stream of files being processed by this hunting system, and then you have the output of that prioritized in some way. So the hunting system then takes a set of files that are passed through it and produces a notification for any rule that matches a particular file. So in our case, we had maybe 300, 400 notifications per day that we were getting via email. So this is not a good condition, again, for an analyst to have to deal with, because at the beginning of their day, they have a full mailbox, which they have to filter through and decide which of these things are important. They don't really have the ability to decide which ones are important. All they have time for is to pick ones that seem interesting for them. So from there, they then need to take the file and upload it to a sandbox. And so what we're going to do is look at the right-hand swim lane for sandboxing. So this is the sandboxing process. Now you have a file that you've pulled out of a repository or out of the hunting system, and you need to upload it to the sandbox. From here, the sandbox needs to execute the file and observe any of the dynamic analysis techniques, and to pull out behavioral patterns and also static analysis. So that takes time. So the analyst is waiting for that to complete. And then they get either one report, or if they're using more than one sandbox, they get multiple different reports. Each sandbox may have a different style of reporting. So the analyst needs to know in advance how to read that report and how to find the information they need. Then, once they've gotten the report, they need to analyze the data from the sandbox, and they also need to analyze the notifications from the Yara hunting system. And finally, they need to manually write an Intel report that they would then serve to one of their Intel consumers. So let's move to the next slide, and we'll see how we have improved this process. So on the left side, in the lower left-hand corner, we have a repository. So the first thing we did was looked at the rules themselves, and I realized that so a Yara rule looks a lot like source code, and the way that we treat it is a lot like source code. So why don't we take one of the solutions from development and from application development code and use a repository? So we've chosen to use a Git repository here. It doesn't necessarily need to be Git. It just needs to have some sort of revision control system so that you can make sense of your rules and also have more than one analyst working on the same rule set. Another thing that you get from a repository is you get to see who made which changes and when, and you can track changes, and you can also revert changes if there's a mistake made. So again, this does not, in your case, need to be Git. You could choose Subversion. You could use CVS if you have a proprietary solution. The point is to use a revision control system to keep your rules sane. So the next step here up there for the analyst is to update the rules in the revision control system and then check those changes back into the repository. And then in the next box to the right, you want to deploy the rule sets to the hunting system. So what we've done here is we have a set of scripts that take the data from the repository and then programmatically prepare it for deployment to the Yara hunting system. This prevents any copy-paste errors. It prevents any of the little just human errors that people are prone to make. Then the rule sets get deployed out to the Yara hunting system, and from there, full-on automation takes over. So the Yara hunting system is then going to produce a lot of notifications. But these notifications are no longer read by an analyst. They're going to be read by our notification prioritization system. And I want to pause here and highlight one of the things that we've done here is that each one of the rules has a priority and a confidence that have been assigned in advance before deploying them to the hunting system. And what this does, this allows your business to make choices in priority and give one rule a higher or lower priority based on your business use case and your business needs. The confidence is then added to that by the analyst, and this is another important component, and it allows the analyst to tune the rule knowing whether or not this rule is noisy, whether it has a lot of false positives, and how clean of an output the rule will produce. So using these two components, the prioritization and confidence, what we do is we arrange the notifications in chronological order, so starting with the newest notifications first, and then starting with the highest confidence, highest priority notifications. We then go out to the repository and choose that that set of files to download. Now, as you may know, some of these repositories that you're pulling files from have a limit, so that as a user, as a paid user for this repository, you may only have a certain number of credits per month that you're allowed to use. So one of the goals in our project here is to maximize your consumption of this limited resource. So you take that amount of credits per month and divide it up and give yourself a daily allowance and build that allowance into the automation. So the automation knows how many files it can download on a particular day. So then it sends those files automatically to the sandbox. This process happens in the morning before the analysts get there, so they don't have to sit and wait for the sandbox to give them results. The sandbox has already produced results. And then it takes all of the results and culls the information that analysts need from the report and takes that, including the notification itself and the data from the notification, and combines them into one area of data, one pile of data basically, that the analyst can go through in Threat Connect. And then from there, the analyst works in Threat Connect to look through the data and make sense of it, do their analysis, and produce an intel report that they then publish and share with other communities in Threat Connect. So from here, what I want to do is show you a video which will kind of drill down into how we use this day to day. So from here, the first thing that we're going to look at is the rules themselves and how the rules look when they get into Threat Connect. So the rules are pulled down once every few hours, and they're broken apart into individual signatures in Threat Connect. So what you're looking at right now is the list of Yara rules as they're pulled down from the hunting system and then embodied in Threat Connect. So the second thing that happens here, you've got a set of rules, and then each one of the rules is tagged with the rule set name. And as you can see over here on the right-hand side, these are from the China, the CN tag. And then sandbox restricted is something that I will cover in just a moment. Basically, it's just if a rule set produces a file type that your sandbox can't handle, you want to have a sandbox restricted here just so that you don't waste time in your sandbox and waste those resources. So, of course, here you want to look and make sure that your team has met in advance before deploying these rules, and you've made a decision as a team, what is this rule set, what is the value of this rule set for my team? And as you can see here, what we've done is mark these rule sets with a specific priority and confidence. So this particular one is marked with a priority of high, and also a confidence of high. So this means that this is a rule set that we are highly interested in. And so the next step is where you pull in all of the different notifications that are produced by rules being triggered in the Yara hunting system. So you've got a whole group of notifications that come down from the hunting system, and then they're prioritized so that the user of this system does not have to go and decide, is this one better than this one? Is this one more important? They basically have a work queue that they work down from the top and look at each one of the notifications as they've been prioritized. So as you can see here, each notification has a one-to-one relationship with a file. So the file indicator is then matched up with each one of the notifications, and that has a relationship in Threat Connect that's pivotable. So you can pivot from the notification over to the file indicator. And then what you can do is look at all of the other files that are related to that, and as you can see in the next part, these are all related together because they're all from the same particular rule. And it's the extreme server keylogger U rule in this particular case. So each one of these files has been triggered on the Yara rule. And as we can see here, this is the particular notification that was triggered by that rule. Down here, we can see some of the additional data that we pull in from the hunting system. So you get some of the matching file data and also additional metadata about the file. These, as you can see, are the samples that were downloaded due to the prioritization. So we've only pulled down this Malum POS file because it fit our prioritization. And then this is another malware sample of Office CV 2014-1761. So from here, I'm going to pivot out to the file, and then I can also look at the incident. So the incident here is one single notification from the prioritization system. And then from there, I can pivot to the sandbox results. And so these are the sandbox results that after that particular file has been run through the sandbox, the analyst now has the access to this set of C2 indicators. So as you can see, there's a file here, there's one IP address, and then four host indicators that this particular file has called back to during the sandbox session. So the results of the sandbox session are set here so that the analyst does not need to do anything further than look here and interpret these results and then produce their analysis from this point. So let's move to the next slide. And I want to hand it back over to Rich and have him wrap up the presentation.
All right, thanks, Rob. So yeah, just wrapping up, I kind of want to just close out on a quick example. As a kid, I would ask my mom, how to spell something if I was stumped. And, she would always tell me to grab a dictionary and to look it up. And the reason she did this was because she wanted me to learn how to learn versus just, giving me the answer and, being dependent on her. And so really the spirit of giving a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man to fish, and he eats every day of his life, has a lot of applicability within our community. We need to think about how we're going to improve as individuals, as teams, and how those teams help affect the organization, and then ultimately, when we have this mesh of organizations that are better enabled, the industry ultimately benefits. And so if we continue to give others, that correct spelling, or just feed them fish, we need to be able to think about helping them in the long term and really giving our peers that business process by which they can help themselves. And so, what we're getting behind, the idea of sharing these automated, processes, in the context of a platform, is to really transfer this knowledge. And many, folks, have heard the adage, knowledge is power, right? And so our objectives here at Threat Connect is to really transfer both that knowledge and power to our customers so they can take control of their data and make better decisions about their data in the sphere of the security space. And so, we're doing this because by giving them a flexible platform that's going to really help them make their data work for them. And we're not just talking about aggregating a bunch of someone else's feeds and cramming them into a SIEM. I'm talking about really making this information useful to you, customized to your business processes, and streamlining and aligning your people with your security investments through process. So, I've spent a good bit of time on a tractor here. In fact, I spent my Easter weekend clearing brush and limbing trees. I'm actually covered in poison ivy because of that. And so, for folks that aren't familiar with tractors, they have very powerful engines. And a good-sized farm tractor is going to have this PTO drive, which is basically an implement or a function of the tractor that allows the user to transfer power directly from the engine to modular purpose-built implements, things like mowers or tillers or post hole diggers. So much like what Rob was talking about here, depending on whatever tasks we need to do, we can leverage our platform to create custom-built solutions for our business processes. So just like a tractor, you back it up to an implement, you connect into it, and you're ready to go to work with whatever task or job you need to do. So ThreatConnect is delivering that same type of PTO extensibility through our SDKs and our API. So now everyone has the ability to take their own threat intelligence business processes and really create and or share apps, these threat intelligence implements via our exchange. And so this construct is going to allow your organization to adopt or create your own purpose-built solutions for whatever threat intelligence business cases you have. And so, these can also be just as easily giving away, or so that others don't have to reinvent that wheel. So, with that said, I think we can hand things over for questions. Barring any questions, we'll hand it back over to Mike.
Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen, for that great presentation. Before we get to our question and answer session, I'd like to first put everyone to work. Please fill out the feedback form that has opened on your computer. To complete the form, just press the Submit Answer button at the bottom of the page, and I want to thank you in advance for completing that form. Your participation in the survey allows us to better serve you. And now, on to the Q&A portion of our event. As a reminder, to participate in the Q&A, just type your question into the text box located below the media player, then click the Submit Question button. Those we don't have time for will receive a written response later. Let's start off with a question from Sam, who says, do you have any examples of the increase in productivity or the gain in efficiencies that you found from implementing these changes?
So that's a very good question. I think I can handle that question. So when we deployed this in mid last year, so we have a bit of data before and after we deployed it. Mm-hmm. And so looking across the year 2015, I found that we had in the hunting process, so the process and analysis of a sample, we had a 15% reduction in the time that it took to produce an intelligence and to produce intelligence based on one single sample. So what we looked at was how many samples did we look at across this time. There were about 1,500 individual samples that we looked at for one single analyst. And so across that time, that single analyst saved about 300 hours. And so if you think about it, in the context of just moving stuff from one room to another, picking up a box in one room and then walking to another room and just setting down the box, our analysts were sitting there just moving data around and not using their brain. They were just using their clicking finger, basically wasting this 300 hours of just moving boxes from one room to another. So that's actually a lot of time. That's about a week worth of wasted time. And so what we also found on the flip side of that was we had a 30% increase in content production. So that 300 hours that was wasted before was reclaimed into productive time that was used to produce additional content in Direct Connect.
Terrific. Thanks for that. Keep the questions coming. This one comes from Charles, who wants to know, is this process only for the threat intel team, or are there other stakeholders who can leverage this?
So I'll take that. Absolutely, this process can be used by multiple teams, depending on, of course, the construct of the organization. If it's a large organization with a SOC and an IR team and threat intel team. But the one that really comes to mind is the incident response team. Being able to leverage information derived from that process is yet just another source of information. I mean, when an incident is kicking off and folks are trying to make game time decisions, I mean, you have individuals across the organization trying to kind of attack the problem with more answers than questions, and so they can leverage this as just yet another source of information, and also depending on what file source is also kind of dependent too. I mean, we leverage VTIMS for this model organism, but there could be other sources of files. For example, your mail server, NIDs, HIDs. Different sensor types that you could be, basically leveraging your own internal enterprise data to, go to work for all your other stakeholders. And so it's just, this information can just be a key enabler for, quite a few folks. Again, the IR, team trying to get their arms around whatever sort of threat that they might be dealing with. This can allow them to go back, leverage, memorialized information that's been, captured over time, and then, then you have a very, very strong, bidirectional flow of information between your operational incident response team and then your supporting element in terms of your threat intel team, assuming they're two different groups or not converged. But absolutely, this could be leveraged from various stakeholders across the organization.
Great, thanks for that. This one comes from Diane, who wants to know, does this only apply to VirusTotal, or are there other use cases for this?
I think I can take that question, thanks. So, as I said earlier, as my background being in biology, this is sort of an experiment, and I wanted to have a model organism, and so my model organism in this case is VirusTotal. But this system can be expanded and extrapolated into any hunting system or basically anything that has a stream of files going past signatures. That's the concept here, is that you're prioritizing your signature set, and then the output of those signatures as they're being triggered is based on your business priority for what you're looking for any particular signature. So this could be expanded into other hunting systems. If you have a Yara hunting system that is looking at files that are going across your mail server, it could be files that are being pulled down by your network intrusion detection system. It could be endpoint protection. You may have documents and executables that are being flagged as suspicious or otherwise on an endpoint, and those are, again, a stream of files going past a signature. So you're basically prioritizing your signature system based on your business's priorities. So it doesn't necessarily need to be the system that we chose to look at in our experiment, but it's something that you could use in any situation where you've got signatures and you have to manage those signatures based on your business priorities.
Thanks for that. That's all we have time for, gentlemen. Any final closing comments before we wrap?
No, I think we're going to just put a slide up here with a pointer to the blog for those that are interested in kind of reading through what we covered in a little bit more detail. I think the video is also posted there, and then just encouraging folks to sign up for a free account and see how this process and others can be leveraged for their own organizations.
Terrific. Thanks for that. And as you can see, you can just sign up there at threatconnect.com/free. Within the next 24 to 48 hours, you will also receive a personal follow-up email with details and a link to today's presentation on demand. Additionally, you can view today's event on demand by visiting darkreading.com/webinar_upcoming.asp, as you see there on the slide. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Threat Intelligence Processes Are a Journey, Not a Destination, brought to you by Threat Connect. This webinar is copyright 2016 by UBM. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted, if that's the case, by Dark Reading and Threat Connect, who are solely responsible for its content, and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. On behalf of our guests, Rich Barger and Robert Simmons, I'm Michael Krieger. Thanks for your time, and have a great day.